Marshall Peak, Chapter 5908. Sacrifice the tail to survive. Marshall Peak, however, when a large number of Eighth-Order small stone race masters appeared, Nayu was shaken. He had no idea whether, or not, the Supreme One's soul clone would still be able to protect itself in the face of such a tactic. Unfortunately, he could not afford to think more about the situation at this moment, as he had already fallen completely into a disadvantage in his fight against Mi Jingluan. It would be disastrous if he were to allow himself to get distracted any further. So he had no choice but to push down his worries and focus on the battle at hand. On the other side, more than 2,000 Eighth-Order small stone race masters pounced on the black ink giant spirit god on Yang Kai's command. Though they had large, stalwart bodies, all of them were still as tiny as ants compared to the black ink giant spirit god. This scene was just like a colony of ants attacking an elephant. Each scrambled up onto every part of the black ink giant spirit god's body and clung on tight with their hands and legs. Yang Kai stretched out both hands, and the great sun and moon marks glowed with an unprecedentedly dazzling light. As he clenched his fists, he roared, "Explode!" Under the influence of the great sun and moon marks, all of them small stone race masters exploded into yellow and blue lights, which seemed to gush out from within their bodies, leaving behind an extraordinarily rich and pure yin and yang element power. Each point of light was like a droplet of water collecting into a giant pool, turning into a halo that melted into and connected with each other to envelope a vast space. In just 3 short breaths, the yellow and blue lights melted away, replaced by a pure white light. The white light was not too dazzling at first, but after contracting for an instant, it spread out violently. The entire battlefield was covered by the light in an instant. Both armies on the battlefield, regardless of their cultivation realm, even the royal lords and Ninth Order masters, had their vision filled with white. Everything disappeared, and nothing could be seen. The noisy and horrific battlefield went eerily silent for a moment, as if time had stopped flowing. The light that was of utmost purity exploded, penetrating the barriers of the void and shining far into the depths of the black ink battlefield. Even the detonation of the purifying black ink battleships was like a firefly next to the bright moon when compared to this scene. Never once had an explosion of purifying light of this magnitude been seen, since the humans began using it to restrain black ink strength. Even Yang Kai had not predicted the terrifying power that was brought about by the sacrifice of 2,000 Eighth-Order small stone race masters. Around the origin of the explosion of purifying light, there had been a large number of black ink clansmen holding the defense line, but after the eruption, the vast majority of those auras evaporated. Those who were lucky enough to survive still suffered a large drop in their strength. The explosion of purifying light brought about by the sacrifice of 2,000 Eighth-Order small stone race masters had completely collapsed an entire segment of the Black Ink clan's defenses with just its after-effects. Almost every Black Ink clansman in and around the No-Return Pass was affected by the purifying light to some degree, compromising their strength to a certain extent. After more than a dozen breaths, the dazzling light finally dissipated, and the eerie tranquility was disturbed by the noise of death and slaughter. As countless numbers of Black Ink clansmen howled in pain, Black Ink's strength was constantly escaping uncontrollably from their bodies, as if they had accidentally fallen into a wok of hot oil. Seeing this situation, the human race army attacked with all their might. They would never miss such a good opportunity. The purifying light was a great danger to the Black Ink clan, but it had no effect on the humans. Originally, the Black Ink clan army were fighting hard to resist the humans, so it was difficult to break through their defenses. But every front was given a good opportunity now to strike. In a matter of breaths, they easily broke through each defense line and routed the Black Ink clan's forces. Yang Kai himself did not expect that his trump card against the Black Ink giant spirit god would fundamentally alter the tide of war and save countless numbers of human race soldiers. At this moment, he did not pay attention to the battlefield of the armies, and instead turned his head towards a certain place in the void. Standing there was a huge creature, one of the black ink giant spirit gods. This black ink giant spirit god had originally come out from the divine spirit ancestral land, the same one who was restrained by the combined efforts of Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing for thousands of years. Yang Kai had dealt with it several times in the past. It had never properly looked at Yang Kai since, from its standpoint, Yang Kai was nothing more than an ant, no matter how powerful he was. Whether it was a strong ant or a weak ant, there was no difference to it. But now it finally had to face this ant that it had been ignoring, and it was because this ant actually had the power to wound it, even if it was through borrowing an external force. Yang Kai's gaze swept over the black ink giant spirit god's figure, especially the two stumps where its arm and leg had been torn off from. Thick, viscous black blood spurted out of the huge wounds like two black fountains. It was a spectacular sight to behold. The arm that he lost was in Ah Da's arms, while the missing leg was wrapped between Ah Da's two legs. The moment when the purifying light erupted, the black ink giant spirit god had decided to act like a lizard and sacrifice its tail to save its body. Yang Kai's brows knitted into a frown. From the wounds on the black ink giant spirit god's arm and leg, it was evident that they were severed voluntarily. Unable to break free from Ah Da's grip, it had no other choice but to regain its freedom through such a decisive method. Yang Kai was glad that he made the small stone race masters cling to the giant spirit god's body when he summoned them. Otherwise, it might have actually been able to evade a direct hit from the purifying light. Even though Yang Kai wasn't able to fully unleash the purifying light's might against his foe, the black ink giant spirit god still lost an arm and a leg. Moreover, Yang Kai could clearly sense that its aura had weakened significantly. It managed to break free from Ah Da's grip by sacrificing an arm and leg, but the purifying light still played a significant role, which could be seen from the black ink's strength leaking endlessly from its body. This black ink giant spirit god was no longer the same master that inspired fear and despair in people's hearts from before. Yang Kai raised his hand and summoned his Azure Dragon Spear. Dao's strength shook, and the space-time river manifested. The long river coiled around the spear, giving the Azure Dragon Spear an indescribable sense of spirituality. "Ah, duh, let's go!" Yang Kai shouted. Lifting his spear, his aura rose steadily. After feigning weakness for so many years, he could finally unleash his full power without any restraint. Yang Kai was cheering in joy inwardly. It felt like he had finally broken free of the shackles that bound him and regained his freedom. "Yeah, Da responded with a resounding voice. Immediately, Da grabbed the arm and leg that his opponent discarded and began using them as weapons, swinging and smashing them fiercely, creating violent shockwaves and displaying his imposing power. Yang Kai turned his head with difficulty and saw Da getting further and further away, causing his battle aura, which had risen to a peak, to nearly collapse. "Where is it? I can't see it." Da's thunderous voice shook the void, his vision still completely white. Though being enveloped by the purifying light at such a close range did not cause any real damage to Da, it temporarily blinded him. So how could he still see where his opponent was? Before Yang Kai could call out to him, he was already engulfed in a sense of great crisis. When Yang Kai turned around, he saw that the black ink giant spirit god had already raised its remaining hand and swung it down in the direction where he was located. The hand that covered the void appeared slow, but it was actually extremely fast. The moment when this giant hand was about to smash him, Yang Kai could even feel space solidifying around him. The power of this attack was absolutely terrifying, and Yang Kai could clearly see the void shattering wherever it passed. With no way to escape, Yong Kai let out a roar and thrust his spear out. Around his spear, the space-time river shook and myriad Tao strengths burst forth, breaking through the confines of space. Yong Kai became one with his spear, transforming into a stream of light and rushing straight towards the approaching hand. Before he even truly collided with the palm, Yong Kai was met with an overwhelming force. Yong Kai felt like he had run into an invisible blockade that was as sturdy as any metal. His body shook violently as he blocked the thunderous attack, coughing up golden blood in the process. In the next instant, the large hand that covered his whole vision suddenly closed, seemingly trying to squash him to death. The palm closed into a fist, but a stream of light emerged from between the cracks of its fingers. It was Yong Kai who was able to escape in time before disaster struck. World force surged, and Tao strength shook. Yong Kai turned into a thunderbolt, sweeping upwards along his opponent's extended arm like a thunder dragon. Yong Kai had not exerted his full power since cultivating with the help of the star boundary and myriad monster world. He had been hiding his true power all this while so as to keep Mo Na Yi from catching any clues about him. Thus, even he himself had no idea just what would happen if he were to use his full power. Today, the world would bear witness, facing off against a black ink giant spirit god alone. Yong Kai no longer held any reservations. From his small universe, a majestic power began pouring out endlessly. The rise in cultivation seemed to make it even easier for him to manipulate his Tao strengths, and he had never felt such a powerful force before. This power even gave him the illusion that if Mo was standing in front of him, he would still be able to punch its body full of holes. Yong Kai was fast, so fast that it was hard to say just how fast it was. In an instant, Yong Kai had already reached the black ink giant spirit god's neck by flying up its arm. After a moment of hesitation between deciding on transforming into his dragon form or remaining in his current state, Yong Kai chose the latter. Thrusting out the spear in his hand, a towering spear shadow came down on the black ink giant spirit god's neck. An angry howl erupted, and the pain in the black ink giant spirit god's eyes grew even more intense. It was already in great agony from being wounded by the purifying light and sacrificing its arm and leg to receive Yong Kai's frenzied attack, now made it even more unbearable. When the spear shadow dispersed, the black ink giant spirit god's neck was covered in countless wounds. Black blood was flowing out of each wound, and its flesh was completely flayed. Tao's strengths even lingered in its wounds, making it a miserable sight to watch. However, Yong Kai could not help but click his tongue. His attack was in no way weak. Any royal lord would likely have been killed on the spot if they were to receive such a blow, but for a behemoth like the black ink giant spirit god, it was simply not enough. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5909. The end has come. Martial Peak, there were pros and cons to having a large body. First of all, there was the difficulty in moving around in a fight and the lack of dexterity, but a large size also allowed one to take much more damage without being critically wounded. Fatal attacks could often become just mere scratches from the size difference alone. Yong Kai had a deep understanding of that fact, as he had experienced it himself many times in the past through fighting using his dragon transformation secret art. In terms of size, the black ink giant spirit god surpassed even his divine dragon form, and thus the advantages that came with his massive size would also be amplified to the extreme. The flayed wounds on its neck that were spouting black blood may look horrific, but in truth, it was nothing much for a black ink giant spirit god. Despite its strength being greatly weakened by the purifying light, the black ink giant spirit god was still undoubtedly worthy of being the so-called Supreme One Soul clone. The flesh at the wound writhed, and rich black ink strength poured out. Then the injury was quickly stabilized. Only Yong Kai's Tao strengths were not that easy to disperse and remained stuck to its wound, constantly changing and evolving, continuing to cause damage. Seeing this, Yong Kai made an instant decision to retrieve his spear and escape. Before the black ink giant spirit god could swing its palm over again, Yong Kai stuck to its shoulder and rushed in the opposite direction. In the blink of an eye, Yong Kai reached the stump of its severed arm, which was still oozing thick black blood, but in just a short moment, the terrifying wound was greatly relieved. It would likely take no more than a couple dozen more breaths for the severed arm to scab over just like its neck, leaving only a closed wound behind without black blood oozing out anymore. Its regenerative abilities were truly shocking. Yong Kai raised his spear, and as world force surged, his body moved with his weapon, turning into a spiral that drilled into the wound at his arm. The black ink giant spirit god was instantly overtaken by an immense pain that caused it to hiss in shock and anger. "What are you doing?" Yong Kai did not answer. He had brought out his full strength and merged with his spear, turning into an unstoppable blade that broke through the thick blockade of black ink strength, trying to penetrate into the black ink giant spirit god's body from its wound. Don't even dream of it. The black ink giant spirit god knew what was coming. No matter how strong it was, it still could not anticipate what would happen to it if it allowed Yong Kai to succeed. Its huge eyes were filled with fear and panic. It never thought that it would fall into such a situation in such a short amount of time since the fight began. As soon as it finished speaking, it raised its hand and slapped it down at Yong Kai, as if swatting at a mosquito that was biting it. If that palm connected, then Yong Kai would die even if he were to transform into his divine dragon form. At the same time, it also exerted all of its power to form a viscous, yet sturdy defense around the wound to stop Yong Kai's invasion. As long as it could swat its opponent to death before he had a chance to invade its body, then the crisis would be easily resolved. Yong Kai felt an unprecedented crisis fall upon him, and as the black ink giant spirit god's palm descended, he could keenly feel death enveloping his body and mind, causing him to feel suffocated. Not a single part of him, both inside and outside, was not trembling in fear. Even though he had encountered many life or death crises throughout his cultivation journey, he had never encountered one as strong as this one. Death was so certain that it almost gave him the illusion that he had already died. The defense that was formed out of black ink strength at the wound was extremely sturdy. Even though Yong Kai attacked with full force, he was not able to break through it instantly. Moreover, his opponent did not just lay out a single defense. Instead, it was constantly repairing and strengthening it. Naturally, the best option here would be to just give up and escape in order to ensure his safety, then search for another opening to exploit. However, after such an experience, it would not be so easy to get another opportunity like this, as the black ink giant spirit god would definitely be on its guard. In this life or death moment, Yong Kai's lips curved into a fierce smirk, and his already terrifying aura climbed to even greater heights, causing the surrounding space to tremble in unrest. "You court death?" The black ink giant spirit god roared furiously and swung its palm down even more fiercely. Everywhere its palm passed, space crumbled like a shattered mirror. The huge palm suddenly stopped when it was only a dozen or so kilometers away from Yong Kai, as if it had encountered a huge resistance. It was a severed arm extended across the void that suddenly blocked its fierce attack, an arm no different from its intact arm in terms of length and shape. Akta had finally returned. He had blocked the fatal blow for Yong Kai at this most critical moment. Yong Kai had also seen Ada rushing over from the corner of his eye, which was what made him put his all into this decisive move. Holding a severed arm in one hand and a severed leg in the other, Ada was furious, almost face to face with the black ink giant spirit god, and shouted fiercely, "What do you think you're doing to my little friend?" In this era of endless black ink strength, As members of the giant spirit god clan, it was difficult to even find food to eat. Their little friend was now his and Aer's only source of food. If their little friend were killed, wouldn't they have to starve in the future? The simple-minded Ada had long realized that only his little friend could provide them with delicious food, so no matter what happened, he would not allow his little friend to be harmed in any way. Anyone who dared to hurt his little friend must die. Faced with Ada's fury, the black ink giant spirit god could only respond with a pained howl, because the moment when its attack was blocked by Ada, a violent shockwave hit Yonkai's back like an invisible wall. In that instant, the bones in Yonkai's body could be heard cracking, but it was also that force that allowed him to break through the blockade of black ink strength. Body and spear united as one as he plunged into the black ink giant spirit god's severed arm. All light disappeared, and boundless darkness engulfed him. Yonkai felt like he had fallen into a pitch-black ocean, but he moved forward without hesitation, breaking through layers of physical barriers and diving straight into the black ink giant spirit god's body. As his spear traveled through the body of the black ink giant spirit god, it encountered significant resistance at first, but in a few breaths, the resistance suddenly weakened. Ada, who had launched a fierce flurry of attacks on the black ink giant spirit god, forcibly diverted its attention to protecting itself, which naturally meant that it could not fully focus on Yonkai, who had invaded its body. In the vast void, the battle between the two giant spirit gods was extremely brutal, but Ada clearly had the upper hand. Wielding the severed limbs of his opponent as weapons, every blow caused the injured black ink giant spirit god to stagger and stumble in a pitiful state. When the other black ink giant spirit god saw what was happening, it tried to come over and support its ally, but how could Aer allow him to do so? With everything he had, he kept it firmly tied down. On a different battlefield, Missouri Naye's eyes trembled violently, his face filled with disbelief. In fact, when Yonkai unleashed his full strength, Mo Nayi had already sensed that something was amiss, and an unlikely scenario sprang in his heart. His intelligence made him doubt this thought, but now it seemed that his unbelievable suspicions were confirmed. He has been hiding his strength all this time, Mo Nayi asked while defending against Mi Jingluan's furious attacks. What do you think? Mi Jingluan replied, casually, while searching for his opponent's weakness. Naturally, he would not be kind enough to answer his enemy's question. However, this response only made Mo Nayi more certain of his own judgment. Why? He muttered in disbelief. Yonkai had been concealing a massive army of 8th Order small stone race masters. He must have possessed them for many years, yet hid them all so he could use them against the black ink giant spirit god, which was understandable, since they could not be exposed easily, as it would alert the Black Ink clan. Then it would be difficult for them to play their part as a hidden weapon. But why would Yonkai also conceal his true strength? Judging from the aura erupting from Yonkai earlier, his true strength was absolutely terrifying. If he had such strength, then why had he been hiding it for so long? If he revealed his true strength during the previous 10-year war, how many pseudo-royal lords would have suffered? Even he, a royal lord, might not have survived. Why do you think? Mi Jingluan gave an equally generic answer, his fan sweeping out fiercely, sending a violent wind blade that cut a deep wound into Mo Naye's abdomen. He had finally found an opening. Perhaps it was because Yonkai's performance distracted Mo Nayi, but the royal lord had truly lost his bearings at this moment. Mo Nayi reeled back as black blood spurted out, but Mi Jingluan's unending attacks followed him closely. Suddenly, Mo Nayi gave a weary scoff. I understand now. It was the black ink giant spirit gods. Yonkai concealed his strength and hid his 8th Order small stone race army. Also, he could use it against the black ink giant spirit gods. because whether it be the two giant spirit gods of the human race or the two black ink giant spirit gods of the Black Ink clan, they were the key to determining the outcome of the war. Only by finding a way to deal with the opponent's strongest masters could they truly bring this war to an end. Mo Na-yi had seen through that fact even before this war even began. So how could Yang Kai not be aware of it? Moreover, his attempt to conceal his ability by feigning weakness was indeed effective. The Black Ink giant spirit gods had not paid any attention to Yang Kai, only considering the true giant spirit gods as opponents. As old rivals who had fought each other for thousands of years, they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, but they never would have expected to suffer such a big loss at Yang Kai's hands. Defeat was now inevitable, and Mo Na-ye's heart was filled with sadness. He could not figure out just how Yang Kai gained such power in such a short amount of time. Only about 700 years had passed since he ascended to the Ninth Order in the Universe Furnace world, a paltry number that hardly amounted to anything in the eyes of Ninth Order masters. 700 years was barely enough time for a new Ninth Order master to consolidate their cultivation and make a little bit of progress. But the momentum that Yang Kai displayed at this moment was basically no different from the strongest Ninth Order masters that Mo Na-yi had witnessed all those years ago. If he considered that the abilities that Yang Kai showed had always been far superior to his peers to begin with, perhaps even the most senior and experienced veteran Ninth Order masters from back then would be inferior to him in terms of combat effectiveness. When the human race was at its peak, the Ninth Order masters struggled to deal with the Black Ink giant spirit gods, even though there were 100 of them. There was only a single time where they managed to kill a Black Ink giant spirit god, but that was only with Aer's help and at great cost. But now, with only Yang Kai and a single giant spirit god, the humans were able to force a soul clone of the Supreme One into a desperate situation. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:10, Universe covered in black ink. Marshall Peak, fierce battles were taking place everywhere on the vast battlefield, but the most intense and shocking one was undoubtedly the fight between the giant spirit gods and the Black Ink giant spirit gods. Aer and his opponent were fully entangled, their powerful clashes causing space itself to shatter. Void cracks appeared one after another and clung onto their large bodies like spider webs, and from those cracks, an extremely strong aura of chaos and nihility was spilling out. Only two fates awaited ordinary creatures in such an environment. One was to fall in and become lost in the void. If they were very lucky, they might find a way out, but if not, they would be forever trapped. The second outcome was to simply be sliced to pieces and die. Each void crack was a tear in space, so it naturally possessed immense power. Nothing good could come to those who came into contact with these torn and displaced cracks. However, the two massive beings confronting each other in this dangerous environment at this very moment were not ordinary by any definition. The void cracks, which would normally be a death sentence, merely left slight scratches on their skin, barely able to cut them at all. Looking from afar, these two supreme masters were surrounded by endless cracks, making it look as if they were fighting in another space-time. On the other hand, Da's battle with the second Black Ink giant spirit god was a completely different situation. Thanks to Yang Kai's sudden attack and the sacrifice of 2,000 Eighth Order small stone race masters, this Black Ink giant spirit god had only battled Da for a short time before losing an arm and a leg, which could be said to have greatly damaged its foundation. Now, with Yang Kai wreaking havoc inside its body, the Black Ink giant spirit god had to divert some of his attention to defend against him, so it had completely fallen into a disadvantage in the face of Da's furious beating. With each strike that landed, the Black Ink giant spirit god staggered and was sent flying back, whereas Da only became stronger as the fight went on. Though the severed limbs of the opponent didn't possess any kind of divine power, they were incredibly tough and displayed tremendous power in Da's hands. In no more than a few dozen breaths, the black ink giant spirit god was in a miserable state covered in black blood. The panic in its eyes gradually deepened. At this moment, it was facing not only Da's flurry of attacks, but also what Yang Kai was doing inside its body, which was the true source of its fear. It could keenly feel that as Yang Kai moved within its enormous body, the auras of countless life forms were being left behind. Even though it had no time to examine what was happening, it knew very clearly just what those living creatures were. Realizing that its death was inevitable if it did not act, the black ink giant spirit god roared and forcibly blocked Da's ferocious attacks before suddenly its body shook and it snarled. "The universe shall be covered in black ink." As soon as those words were spoken, the black ink strength lingering outside its body, which was like a dense fog, solidified for a moment before being drawn into its body by an invisible force. The price it paid for this was being struck fiercely on the forehead by Da's attack, causing a part of its skull to cave in. At that moment, Yang Kai, wielding the Azure Dragon Spear, was still drilling his way through the thick black ink strength blockade as he shuttled around inside of the black ink giant spirit god's body. The portal to his small universe had been opened, and as he swam about, a massive number of small stone race soldiers poured out of his small universe and took up positions inside of the black ink giant spirit god. Yang Kai had brought some 400 million small stone race soldiers from the chaotic dead territory and handed quite a large percentage of them to the Ninth Order Masters to distribute to the human army in order to enhance its forces. However, he still left some behind as reserves. Besides the numerous Eighth Order small stone race masters that were sacrificed earlier, Yang Kai still had a large army of at least 30 million below the Eighth Order. These small stone race soldiers were constantly charging out of his small universe and invading the black ink giant spirit god's body. When the black ink giant spirit god finished speaking, though, Yang Kai clearly felt the boundless darkness in this place become even darker. It was a very strange feeling, as there was supposedly no way a darkness where an ordinary person could not even see their fingers in front of them could get even darker, but that kind of feeling did arise in Yang Kai. In the next instant, he realized that his small universe was shaking violently and the open portal also closed involuntarily. Shocked, Yang Kai quickly examined himself and was aghast to find the world tree clone swaying violently while propping up the invisible boundary wall around his small universe. Outside of the boundary wall was black ink strength of a purity he had never seen before, and it was trying to break into his small universe. With the world tree clone to isolate and protect his small universe, it remained flawless and undamaged for thousands of years, invulnerable to external forces. It had a similar effect to the 4 universe pillars, but even stronger. Since obtaining the World Tree clone, Yang Kai had never been worried that his small universe would be stained by black ink strength. That was because black ink strength could not break his small universe's boundary wall, nor corrupt his small universe with the World Tree clone shielding it. Currently, the black ink strength's attack and the World Tree clone's protection were like a spear and a shield. If the protective shield was strong enough, it could ignore the attack of the sharp spear. In the past, the protective shield of the World Tree clone could easily block the corruption of black ink strength, regardless of its source. Yang Kai had never felt affected by it before, and he could even recklessly enter environments full of black ink strength. It was an act other open heaven realm masters were fearful of, yet he could do so without worrying about being corrupted by black ink strength. But this time, Yang Kai clearly felt that the protective shield of the World Tree clone was under pressure. This was undoubtedly an indication that the black ink giant spirit god was using a powerful technique against him. Yang Kai couldn't help but think of the Royal Lord's secret technique, The humans had never been able to figure out how the royal lords cast their secret technique. Yonkai had also endured this secret technique head-on more than once, but with the World Tree clone and the soul-warming lotus protection, it had never affected him. The humans had very limited information on the royal lord's secret technique, but what they did know was that this technique could only be performed by a true royal lord, and that it can be activated silently. Those targeted by the royal lord's secret technique could not resist unless they were in the Ninth Order. Even the most experienced veteran Eighth Order masters would be corrupted instantly by black ink strength when this move was unleashed. Back when the human race army first clashed with the Black Ink clan in the Barren Territory, it was through a use of the Royal Lord's secret technique that 3 Eighth Order masters were corrupted, allowing them to infiltrate the divine spirit ancestral land in the depths of shattered heaven and awaken the Black Ink giant spirit god there. As a result, the human race was routed and had no choice but to give up the barren territory. But despite how powerful the Royal Lord's secret technique was, it was rarely used, as once it was activated, the user's foundation would be greatly damaged, causing a significant decline in strength. Therefore, Royal Lords generally did not use this technique unless they were in absolute control of the situation. The first Royal Lord that Yonkai killed was the one he fought just after advancing to the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm. That Royal Lord had wanted to get rid of Yonkai for good by using the secret technique. This was due to him being angry out of shame from being unable to catch him after chasing him for several dozen years. It severely damaged his foundation as a result, providing an opportunity that Yonkai took advantage of. If Royal Lords could use such a bizarre secret technique, how could the Black Ink giant spirit gods, who were soul clones of Mo, not be capable of something similar? Therefore, when Yonkai sensed that something was amiss, he knew that the Black Ink giant spirit god had to have used a technique similar to the Royal Lord's secret technique, and that was why even the World Tree clone's protective shield was feeling pressured. Yonkai couldn't help but think back to Tsang's words. Despite knowing he had a World Tree clone to isolate and protect his small universe, Tsang had specifically warned him to be wary of Mo. In other words, even with the World Tree clone, he could still fail to resist Mo's Black Ink strength. Inside his small universe, the swaying of the World Tree clone became more and more violent. Yonkai could clearly feel the pressure on his last line of defense, which finally made him realize that what Tsang warned him about back then was not an exaggeration. The Black Ink giant spirit god was already pressuring the World Tree clone. So what if he were to face Mo itself? The World Tree clone really might not be able to protect him then. Moreover, trouble never arrived alone. As his small universe was bearing enormous pressure, Yonkai can clearly feel his knowledge being invaded as well. Boundless Black Ink strength gushed over, staining his originally colorful knowledge completely black. The corruption of Black Ink strength on cultivators had always been both a physical and spiritual affair. Inside Yonkai's knowledge on the small 7-colored island formed by the soul-warming lotus, 2 figures sat idly across each other, playing chess. One of them had a humanoid form, while the other had a beast form. These 2 figures were naturally Yonkai's 2 other selves. Since his 3 selves united, Yonkai advanced into the Ninth Order, but Thunder Shadow's and Fong Tianxi's consciousnesses were preserved and had been staying in the soul-warming lotus all these years. This was the best place for them to remain, as without the soul-warming lotus nurturing, they might have perished with the loss of their physical bodies over time. When the boundless Black Ink strength surged in, Fong Tianxi immediately noticed that something was amiss. When he looked over, there was a look of surprise in his eyes. Thunder Shadow also stood up in a panic, knocking over the chessboard in the process and exclaiming, "Black Ink strength? What is Big Brother doing? How could Black Ink strength reach this place? Big Brother isn't going to be corrupted, is he? Oh, no. What do we do?" He made a scene, looking extremely worried. Fong Tianxi, however, looked at him speechlessly. Reaching out, he restored the knocked-over chess pieces back to their original positions. Don't try to shift focus. You're about to lose. Thunder Shadow turned its head to look at him, shouting, "Who has the heart to play chess with you at such a critical moment? If Big Brother is stained by black ink, we're done for. When that happens, Big Brother will definitely pull us out and eat us one by one." Fong Tianxi's brow couldn't help but twitch. Firstly, if the true body is corrupted by black ink strength, we will also be corrupted by it. Secondly, this is the soul warming lotus, a supreme treasure of the universe that can shield and nurture the soul better than any other item in existence. With the soul warming lotus, even if black ink strength were to invade the true body, Big Brother would still be able to hold on to a trace of clarity and will not be completely corrupted by black ink strength. Is that so? Thunder Shadow sat down with a clueless expression on its face. Fong Tianxi couldn't endure it any longer. Drop the pretentious act. You're not a sore loser, are you? Thunder Shadow scoffed. Chess isn't fun. Let's play something else. So, you finally admit that you're not my opponent. Fong Tianxi looked at it scornfully with his nose in the air. Thunder Shadow bellowed, "Who's not your opponent? Don't think that I have to endure your provocations just because you're the second brother. You better watch your mouth." "Then, let's continue. It's your turn." Fong Tianxi gestured to the board. Thunder Shadow hesitated for a moment before gritting its teeth. "Just watch as I destroy you until you don't even have a single piece of armor left." As black ink strength surged in, the only pure land in Yang Kai's knowledge sea was a chess game where one man and one leopard unceasingly exchanged moves. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5911, Killing the Black Ink Giant Spirit God. Marshall Peak, inside the body of the Black Ink Giant Spirit God. An army of millions of small stone race soldiers were scattered about. If they had been ordinary small stone race members, they might not be able to withstand the corruption of the thick black ink strength. But these small stone race masters had grown by consuming the extremely pure yin or yang energy of the burning light and serene glimmer, so they had a natural resistance to it. Moreover, they were extremely sensitive towards black ink strength and viewed it as their absolute enemy. As soon as they were released, they began attacking the black ink giant spirit god from inside its body, causing it to experience what the pain of being devoured by countless ants was like. No matter how indestructible the black ink giant spirit god was outside, its internal defenses were naturally much weaker. Yang Kai's original plan was to summon all of the small stone race soldiers from his small universe, which amounted to around 30 million, but he had no choice but to stop because of the black ink giant spirit god's secret technique. The longer such an intense battle dragged on, the greater the variables became. As soon as he sensed the black ink giant spirit god's unusual move, Yang Kai decisively activated the great sun and moon marks. The next moment, the tens of millions of small stone race each shone brightly. Yellow and blue lights began to flow and blend in the extremely dark environment, turning it pure white, creating a mystical scene. In the void, the once again swung down his opponent's severed arm, smashing it fiercely towards the black ink giant spirit god, and hitting it squarely in the neck until its head was slightly bent out of shape. At the same time, the black ink giant spirit god's face distorted in extreme pain, as if it was being subjected to unbearable torture. Then, a bright white light overflowed from its mouth and nose. It howled in pain, and its roar echoed throughout the universe, frightening all black ink clansmen who heard it. The bright white light was not only overflowing from its mouth and nose now, but also from the stumps of its severed limbs, and even from the wounds all over its body, creating columns of light like 10,000 swords piercing through its flesh. As the columns of light emerged, so did a figure covered in black blood, rushing out with his spear. It was none other than Yang Kai. He turned his head to look at the pitiful appearance of the black ink giant spirit god, and could clearly sense that its aura had weakened greatly. This eruption of purifying light had an even more profound effect than the sacrifice of 2,000 Eighth Order small stone race masters from before. It made sense. After all, the previous blast of purifying light only enveloped the black ink giant spirit god from the outside, making it a purely external attack. But now, the purifying light was created by the fusion of an army of tens of millions exploding inside its body, meaning almost all of the impact was absorbed by it without any escaping. So, despite the fact that the quality was somewhat lacking, the quantity made up for it, and the damage to the black ink giant spirit god was even greater than before. To charge forward once again. Even though his intelligence was lacking, he was still a member of the giant spirit god clan, whose battle instincts were incredibly strong. Seeing his enemy in such a miserable state, there was no way he would miss this perfect opportunity. In just a few steps, he reached the black ink giant spirit god, and, wielding its severed arm and leg, unleashed a flurry of attacks that left a bloody spectacle wherever they struck. Following the weakening of its aura and the damage to its foundation, the black ink giant spirit god's defense also became weaker. The black ink giant spirit god roared and struggled to resist, but it was simply no match for Ada at this moment. Faced with this barrage of attacks, it could only defend while being forced back step by step. A dragon roar sounded abruptly, and a golden light burst forth as a 100,000 meters divine dragon appeared. The dragon shot forward, taking advantage of when the black ink giant spirit god was already overwhelmed, and wrapped around its neck, looping itself around it. Then the divine dragon lifted his large head and looked the black ink giant spirit god in the eye right in front of him. Despite his large form, the dragon still appeared small compared to the massive black ink giant spirit god. From a distance, it was like a small snake wrapped around a person's neck. The black ink giant spirit god loathed Yang Kai deeply. Knowing that this situation was likely to be disastrous, it directly abandoned its defense against Ada and reached out its one remaining hand to grab the divine dragon. Yang Kai had taken on his dragon form, which allowed him to control his time, Tao's strength much better than when he was in his human form. After all, the Tao of Time was the innate grand Tao of the Dragon Clan. As such, the hand that was trying to grasp him was instantly surrounded by a profound field which made it become extremely sluggish. Opening his dragon maw, a dragon breath spewed forth and smashed into one of the black ink giant spirit god's eyes. In the next instant, the giant eye burst apart. Repeating the same thing on the other side, Yang Kai quickly destroyed the black ink giant spirit god's other eye as well. With both eyes gone, the black ink giant spirit god let out another miserable cry before unleashing all its power, breaking through the time principle blockade, allowing its stalled hand to regain its freedom. However, its attack was interrupted by a fierce blow from Ada before it could reach Yang Kai. Yang Kai took advantage of this opportunity to unleash one Dragon Clan secret technique after another, bombarding the black ink giant spirit god's face at close range. Every secret technique was as powerful as an all-out attack of a peak Ninth Order master, and in just a short amount of time, the face of the black ink giant spirit god had been turned into a bloody mess. Despite that, the black ink giant spirit god still refused to die, displaying a tenacious vitality that Yang Kai couldn't help but marvel at. Since the war between humans and Black Ink Clan began, the humans had only managed to kill a single black ink giant spirit god, which happened during the battle in the Barren Territory several thousand years ago. However, they also paid a huge price for that success, with more than a dozen Ninth Order masters dying in battle. Furthermore, Air was there to provide assistance, and that black ink giant spirit god was already injured and had been prepared to be sacrificed. It could be said that the reason why the black ink giant spirit god was killed in that battle was partly because the Black Ink clan was willing to pay any price to breach the barren territory and invade the 3,000 worlds. Nevertheless, the humans had also paid a high price to slowly wear down their opponent and kill it. As to what they were supposed to do in order to quickly kill a black ink giant spirit god now, the humans still lacked experience and ideas. The black ink giant spirit god in front of them had almost no ability to resist, as it was attacked by Yang Kai in his divine dragon form and Ada, but its extraordinary vitality still basically made it immortal and indestructible. Seeing this, Yang Kai had no choice but to act ruthlessly. When his dragon jaws opened, a golden round bead emerged. It was his dragon bead. The moment the dragon bead appeared, the black ink giant spirit god was able to sense that something was amiss despite losing both its eyes. It opened its mouth and roared, trying to wriggle its neck free from Yang Kai's hold. However, the force applied to it rendered it completely immobile. The golden dragon bead shook faintly before turning into a golden light and blasting into the hole where the black ink giant spirit god's left eye used to be, then bursting out through the back of his head. As the residual energy swept into the depths of the void, a golden beam of light spanning 100 million kilometers was created. Such a fierce blow caused the black ink giant spirit god's neck and head to be flung back as it lost all strength in the hand it was waving around. Thus, the aura of a powerful being, powerful enough to shake the universe, crumbled and dissipated. However, Yang Kai still could not be rest assured. A loud dragon roar echoed across the battlefield, and the dragon coiled around the black ink giant spirit god's neck tightened its grip once again before soaring up into the void. The immense pulling force ripped into the neck of the black ink giant spirit god, directly separating its huge head from its body. At the wound, black blood erupted like a volcano, instantly dyeing a vast expanse of the void, completely black. Another endless flurry of attacks from landed immediately after, smashing the black ink giant spirit god until its body broke into pieces. It wasn't until this moment that the aura belonging to the black ink giant spirit god was completely extinguished. The black ink giant spirit god had fallen. From the moment to restrained this black ink giant spirit god to when Yang Kai ripped its head off, only a short dozen breaths had passed. In such a short period of time, a powerful black ink giant spirit god was killed by the joint efforts of Yang Kai, and regardless of how tenacious its vitality was, regardless of how profound Mo's creations were, there was no way it could have any vitality left after its body was literally smashed into paste. Thousands of years ago, this black ink giant spirit god emerged from the divine spirit ancestral land and laid the foundation for the Black Ink clan's victory in the war in the barren territory. Its strength had been looming over the hearts of all the humans all that time, almost like a towering mountain pressing down on their heads. After all, it was an indomitable and powerful existence. Today, when its aura finally dissipated and its body shattered into pieces, that shadow was at last dispelled. The human race army, which already had the momentum advantage against the Black Ink clan, erupted into cheers at this moment, and their attacks became even fiercer. The Black Ink clan army, which was already at a disadvantage, deflated even further at this sight. This was especially so for the masters from the Black Ink clan. No matter what, they couldn't believe that a soul clone of the Supreme One would be killed in such a short time. When the aura of the Black Ink giant spirit god dissipated, their minds all fell into disarray. The human race masters fighting against them took advantage of this opportunity to expand their advantages even further, while those who were in disadvantageous positions quickly stabilized their situations. It could be said that the death of one of the Black Ink giant spirit gods was not just a loss of one of the Black Ink clan's top masters, but it also had a clear and direct effect on the situation of the entire battlefield. All the Black Ink clansmen realized that all hope had just died, and there was no way they would survive the battle for the no-return pass, no matter what they did. All of them would be slaughtered ruthlessly here. This was a matter concerning the life or death of both races, a blood feud spanning so many years that no one could even say how long it was. It was impossible for them to show any mercy. This decisive battle that had broken out hastily would eventually end in victory for the human race. On the battlefield, Da threw back his head and roared to the heavens, his voice filled with joy and victory. After he was done, he looked around the battlefield with sharp eyes like an eagle or wolf filled with bloodlust. Young Kai saw this and shouted, "Go and help Aer." After receiving the message, Da rushed over to the other side of the battlefield with the severed arm and leg still in hand. Aer was fighting on equal grounds with his opponent there, but when his enemy naturally saw its peer being killed and immediately tried to escape, there was not much Aer could do against a Black Ink giant spirit god intent on escaping. Nevertheless, he did his best to keep it pinned as long as possible. Fortunately, Da arrived quickly, and with the united strength of two giant spirit gods, they instantly trapped their opponent, making it all but impossible for it to flee. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:12, Dead End. Marshall Peak to have killed a Black Ink giant spirit god while hardly sustaining any injuries was a feat that nobody could achieve, not just for the people of today, but even their ancestors of the past eras. It had to be known that when a single Black Ink giant spirit god invaded the divine spirit's ancestral land in the early ancient era, countless powerful divine spirits had inhabited those lands. But even then, the Dragon Emperor and Phoenix Empress of the time still had to use the 16 sacred treasures of the strongest clans and sacrifice themselves to lay a grand array just to suppress and seal it. It was only after hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of erosion from the ancestral land's ancestral strength, that the Black Ink giant spirit god's vitality was finally ground down. Such a huge price was paid, yet they were only able to trap their foe, not directly kill them. In comparison to that, today's fight was an astonishing feat unequaled before in history. Of course, it was mainly thanks to the two explosions of purifying light that greatly damaged the Black Ink giant spirit god's foundation. Even though the ancestral strength in the divine spirit ancestral land provided some suppressive power against Black Ink strength, it was far less potent than purifying light. Even though he did not sustain much damage, Yang Kai expended a lot of his strength, especially when he summoned his dragon bead at the end. So he was basically a dry oil lamp right now. The dragon bead was the culmination of a dragon's cultivation. Just like a monster beast's monster core, one would never summon it unless it was absolutely necessary, for once it was brought out, either one's enemy died or the owner perished. It was a desperate final move. Since he became a grand dragon and obtained his own dragon bead, Yang Kai had summoned this final weapon a few times in the past, and it was exhausting each time he did. This time was no different. It was hard for Yang Kai to even maintain his dragon form after using his dragon bead to attack, so he quickly transformed back into his human form. Not only was his face extremely pale, he looked completely deflated. That was especially true for his dragon vein. Usually, he could circulate the might in his dragon vein without issue even in his human form, but now the power in his dragon vein was almost still. Looking inside himself, Yang Kai could see that even his dragon bead was dim and gray, not bright and golden as before. It seemed like he would need to recuperate for a long time before his dragon vein and bead could be restored. Before then, it would be difficult to even use any techniques related to the Dragon Clan. After directing Da to help Aer, Yang Kai stuffed some recovery pills into his mouth and swallowed them before turning back and rushing over to the no-return pass. The defense line of the Black Ink clan had long been riddled with holes, and humans had the advantage in most of the positions across the battlefield, as they were enveloped by the dazzling lights of both secret techniques and artifacts. The Black Ink clansmen were being wiped out in great numbers every breath. The human race's victory here was set. All that was lacking to resolve this war now was time. In an instant, Yang Kai had passed over the defense line where the human race and the Black Ink clan armies were fighting and went straight into the no-return pass. As space principles surged, his figure swiftly passed through each area of the no-return pass. Everywhere he went, large numbers of Black Ink nests were destroyed. When Ada and Aer were first rushing over from the barren territory, they had already caused significant damage to the Black Ink nests in the no-return pass, but due to how many Black Ink nests there were to begin with, many still remained. With Yang Kai to clean up the rest, all the surviving Black Ink nests would soon be destroyed. If the pseudo-royal lords were still guarding this place, they might have been able to hinder him somewhat, but all of them had left of the inner region of the no-return pass to fight under Mo Na Ye's order. So how could there be any masters left to stop Yang Kai? Within an incense stick of time, the no-return pass became a chaotic mess. All of the Black Ink nests, whether they were high rank, mid rank, or low rank, were all destroyed without exception. Even the Black Ink clansmen that had escaped back to the pass for shelter suffered heavy casualties. Without pause, Yang Kai disappeared in a flash. Somewhere in the battlefield, Missouri Na Yi and Mi Jingluan's fight was still going on, with the situation being extremely disadvantageous for the former. It was reasonable to say that since Mo Na Yi had become a royal lord a few hundred years earlier than Mi Jingluan had advanced to the Ninth Order, he should have a stronger heritage. Yet in reality, he was completely suppressed by Mi Jingluan. Naturally, such a situation arose because of the various changes that happened on the battlefield, causing Mo Na Ye's thoughts to be disrupted. This was especially so with Yang Kai's sudden surge in strength and the death of a Black Ink giant spirit god, which had an immense impact on him. The shrewd and cunning Mi Jingluan naturally seized this opportunity to expand his advantage bit by bit until they reached the current state of affairs. Of course, with Mi Jingluan's current cultivation, killing Mo Na Yi would be difficult even with such an advantage, as he had to be extremely cautious against a final counterattack. In a fight between masters like them, the slightest carelessness could drastically change the outcome. That was why Mi Jingluan did not dare to be careless in the slightest and kept a steady hand from the beginning, never taking risks in a rush for success. But at a certain point, his attacks grew more violent. At the same time, Mo Na Yi keenly caught onto an opening in his defense, and after a moment of hesitation, his originally retreating figure suddenly rushed forward, taking advantage of the gap in Mi Jingluan's secret techniques to throw a punch-out. Mi Jingluan's face immediately showed an expression of panic, and he instinctively tried to block it, but it was too late. As Mo Na Ye's fist was about to hit Mi Jingluan's head, though, Mo Na Ye's body suddenly shook, as if he had been hit by a binding technique, freezing in place. His fist was less than a forearm's length away from Mi Jingluan, and the violent force from it caused the opponent's clothes to flutter. In the face of imminent death, the panic in Mi Jingluan's eyes disappeared, and was instead replaced by an indifferent gaze. As expected, Mo Na Yi laughed bitterly at Mi Jingluan, but those words weren't meant for him. Behind Mo Na Yi, Yang Kai's figure had appeared at some point, and the Azure Dragon Spear pierced through Mo Na Ye's chest. Dao's strengths lingered on Yang Kai's spear as space principles surged, solidifying the surrounding space. Even someone as strong as Mo Na Yi was unable to break free for a time. The three masters were arranged in a straight line in the void, with Yang Kai at the back, Mo Na Yi in the center, and Mi Jingluan in the front. For a while, Nobody spoke. The silence went on for a time before Mi Jing Luan finally said, "You realized that I was baiting you." It was not a question, he was just stating a fact. When Yong Kai rushed over from the no-return pass, he sent a message to Mi Jing Luan, which was why he suddenly revealed an opening. It was to lure Mo Na Yi into attacking him and creating a favorable opportunity for Yong Kai's ambush. Everything went smoothly, and Yong Kai's ambush was extremely successful. So what if I saw through it? A bitter smile appeared at the corners of Mo Na Ye's lips. Mi Jing Luan's eyes flickered, and he nodded lightly. "And you had no choice but to take it, even if he did see through the plan to lure the enemy out. Mo Na Yi could only make his move, hoping to severely injure, or even kill Mi Jing Luan, before being hit by Yong Kai. That way, it wouldn't be a loss even if he died. Of course, he could also choose to evade Yong Kai's ambush, but all that would follow would be a joint attack from both Yong Kai and Mi Jing Luan together, which would still be difficult for him to resist. So he didn't have a choice at all from the start." Yong Kai tilted his head, his gaze passing Mo Na Yi by to look at Mi Jing Luan as he commented, "Senior brother, that was too dangerous." He had communicated with Mi Jing Luan to coordinate their actions, but he never expected the latter to use such a dangerous method. Even Yong Kai's heart was racing with fear for a moment. If he had moved just a bit slower, Mi Jing Luan would have undoubtedly suffered serious injuries. Mi Jing Luan responded indifferently. Fortune favors the bold. Yong Kai sighed, not knowing what to say in reply. He had no doubt that Mi Jing Luan trusted him, but he had no idea that Yong Kai had already exhausted too much of his strength in the previous battle. Even though he recovered some of it while destroying the black ink nests, the time was too short, and he couldn't recover much of his strength. For example, Yong Kai could only use the same set of secret techniques he just used twice more before all his energy ran out again. If Mo Na Yi really managed to avoid his surprise attack, things would have become difficult. "Brother Yang, I have a question to ask before I die." Mo Na Yi spoke to Yong Kai behind him as he stood still, showing no intention to resist. Yong Kai raised a brow. "You may ask, but I may not necessarily answer." Mo Na Yi laughed bitterly. "You humans? How did you discover reinforcements were coming?" Mo Na Yi had speculated the reason the humans were so eager to take down the no-return pass, even at the cost of greater sacrifices, was because they must have discovered reinforcements were rushing over from the primordial heavens' source grand restriction. Unfortunately, he still couldn't figure out how they managed to learn about them. It had to be known that the reinforcements were still more than 10 years away at best, a distance so great that it would have been difficult for the Black Ink clan to even contact them without the help of the Black Ink giant spirit god's divine ability and the Black Ink nests. Mo Na Yi had thought that the reinforcements would be the no-return past Black Ink clan's ticket to survival, allowing them to pincer the humans from the front and back, catching them off guard. Who would have thought that it would become a death decree in the end? Reinforcements? What do you mean reinforcements? Yong Kai asked in a surprised tone. Mo Na Yi turned his head with difficulty so he could see his expression, but as he moved, the Azure Dragon spear shook slightly, forcing him to keep still. Yong Kai continued, "Where can your Black Ink clan get reinforce the primordial heaven source grand restriction? Is it what happened over there?" Mo Na Ye's brow furrowed. Unable to see Yong Kai's face, he could only stare at Mi Jing Luan, who had a look of sudden realization. "The thing you mentioned earlier was about the Black Ink clan's reinforcements." There was a moment of confusion for Mo Na Yi. Before the war started, he tried to probe Mi Jing Luan for clues but failed to get any answers. He had been confident that the humans must have known about their reinforcements, which was why they launched such a decisive attack. But now, judging from Mi Jing Luan and Yong Kai's reactions, it seemed that they actually knew nothing about it. Do the humans really have no idea? Speak. Are Black Ink clan reinforcements from the primordial heavens source grand restriction on the way here now? How is that possible? Yang Kai's shouts sounded from behind, while at the same time, the spear that penetrated his chest pulsed with Dao strengths, causing Mo Nai to groan in pain. Even in such a critical situation, he was still closely observing Mi Jing Luan's expression, and he could see that those eyes were full of worry and anxiety. Ha! 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 Mo Nai could not help but break out in fervent laughter. What are you laughing at? Yang Kai shouted and shook his spear, interrupting Mo Nai's laughter. Marshal Peak. Marshal Peak, Chapter 59:13, Capturing the No Return Pass. Marshal Peak, the immense pain distorted Mo Nai's features, but he gritted his teeth. I laugh at you humans for being so ignorant in the face of the Supreme One's power. No matter how hard you struggle, it is all meaningless. All your efforts will ultimately be in vain. He spoke as if he were stating a fact or laying a malicious curse, but it also seemed like a prediction of the future. Yang Kai coldly snorted. You have a big mouth for someone with little skill. Mo Nai frowned. Brother Yang. Yang Kai shook the spear in his hand, interrupting his words as a strongly disgusted look emerged on his face. Who is your brother Yang? Do you even have the qualifications to call me your brother? Mo Nai looked surprised and stammered. I thought. Yang Kai interrupted him again. We have been fighting each other for many years, and we each have our own victories. So, you think that, as opponents, we should be sympathetic to each other? Shouldn't we? Mo Nai tossed the question back. The disgust on Yang Kai's face deepened. It's you who knows nothing. Yang Kai, have been cultivating for thousands of years and encountered many powerful opponents. Indeed, there are some worth sympathizing with, because it was the pressure they gave me that enabled me to forge ahead step by step until this day. But that does not include you or any other Black Ink clansmen. We are mortal enemies. Only by killing you can we humans find peace. Mo Nai was silent for a moment before suddenly realizing only opponents are sympathetic to each other, not enemies. It seems you understand now. So answer me, where did the Black Ink clan's reinforcements come from? Did something happen at the primordial heaven source grand restriction? You only have one chance to tell me the truth. Yang Kai's icy words were biting like the cold chills of winter. Smirking, Mo Nai looked at Mi Jingluan across from him. Black Ink Eternal? A violent force suddenly erupted from Mo Nai's chest. Yang Kai's 10,000 Dao strength surged. This royal lord, who had been commanding the situation in the Black Ink clan for thousands of years, was blasted into pieces with blood and severed limbs flying everywhere. Mo Nai had fallen. Yang Kai gave him only one chance to speak, but he had no intention of revealing any valuable information. Yang Kai naturally would not show mercy, and regardless of what answer Mo Nai gave, he still would not escape death today. Yang Kai would never give him another chance to escape. 700 years ago, he failed to kill Mo Nai when the universe furnace appeared, which had been a source of regret for him. Later, when the universe furnace closed, he thought he would have another chance to kill Mo Nai, but unexpectedly, he was brought to the edge of the universe by the universe furnace, allowing this guy to escape by some stroke of luck. Mo Nai knew it well, and Yang Kai had also expected this. All along, Mo Nai's biggest threat to the human race was not his strength, but his superior intellect that far surpassed all his other clansmen. If he hadn't been the commander of the Black Ink clan's war effort, this battle at the No Return Pass would not have been as hard fought. Almost 30% of the human race's casualties in the war could be attributed to Mo Nai alone. Now, this royal lord had finally reached the end of his fate. Mi Jingluan reached out and grabbed a severed arm, the limb left behind by Mo Nai after his death. He pried open the large, tightly clenched fist and took out an unhatched Black Ink nest from his palm. Glancing over at Yang Kai, he asked, So, this is the reason you tricked him? With the help of the Void Guard's investigation, the humans learned of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements, which was why they launched this battle so decisively. Mo Na-yi had suspected this, but he couldn't be completely sure. That was why he wanted to get confirmation before his death. Logically, it wouldn't matter even if Mo Na-yi knew the answer, since he was going to die regardless. There was nothing a dying man could do about it, but when he asked the question, and Yang Kai acted like he didn't know, Mi Jingluan quickly played along, pretending to know nothing. In the end, even when Mo Na-yi was killed, he couldn't figure out whether the humans knew about the Black Ink clan's reinforcements in advance or not. Yang Kai nodded. It was just in case, though admitting it wouldn't make much of a difference. Nobody could know what kind of changes it would bring to the situation if they did. Therefore, Yang Kai always upheld a principle of not telling the enemy anything if at all possible. However, judging from the fact that Mo Na-yi was still holding on to the miniature Black Ink nest before he died, what happened here must have spread to the Black Ink clan's reinforcements. The reinforcements must have found out that their presence had been exposed, and that a Black Ink giant spirit god had died in battle. Yang Kai was somewhat helpless about this. After he and Ada had teamed up to kill the Black Ink giant spirit god, he immediately rushed into the No-Return Pass and destroyed all the Black Ink nests to prevent the news from leaking, but the fact of the matter was he couldn't completely prevent it. Black Ink nests were just too convenient in terms of transmitting information. The only fortunate thing now was that the Black Ink clan's reinforcements did not know about the existence of the Void Guard or the space arrays, nor would they have any idea what was going to happen next on the battlefield. The reinforcements traveling through the void had two options now. One was to speed up their march and rush to the No-Return Pass, hoping that the battle would not be over before their arrival. Then they could assist their fellow clansmen on this side and maybe turn the tide. The second option was naturally to hold their position, get into formation, and lay in ambush. They could then slowly start to build up their strength and prepare for the human race army to approach. Under the assumption that the humans knew nothing, it would only be natural for them to lay some sort of gigantic trap. But no matter which option they chose, they could not stop the fate of the Black Ink clan's destruction at the No-Return Pass. With the fall of a Black Ink giant spirit god, the outcome of the battle at the No-Return Pass has already been determined. Clenching his fist, Mi Jingluan crushed the Black Ink nest before gently waving his feather fan. "Junior brother, you should rest for now. I'm afraid we may need your help to deal with the remaining Black Ink giant spirit god as well. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about them. You've already done enough." Yang Kai pondered for a moment and nodded lightly, and after slaying the Black Ink giant spirit god and Mo Na-yi one after another, Yang Kai had exhausted too much energy and needed time to properly recover. Even though the outcome of the battle had already been determined, it was necessary to deal with the remaining Black Ink giant spirit god to end things completely. That thing was not easy to deal with. If the first Black Ink giant spirit god had not been too careless, it would not have fallen in such a short time. After Mi Jingluan left, Yang Kai focused on his recovery without setting up any defenses. He sat cross-legged in the void, without any fear of being attacked by the Black Ink clan. When Mo Na-yi, a royal lord, was killed, the already fragmented Black Ink clan defense line worsened even further, especially for those masters from the Black Ink clan who were fighting against human race masters. Witnessing the fall of the Black Ink giant spirit god had already shaken their minds. Now, with Mo Na-yi's death, the hearts of every territory lord, and even the pseudo-royal lords, were filled with great fear and loss. Before the start of this war, everything had been under control, but once the fighting broke out, everything began to develop in a direction that the Black Ink clan did not hope to see, pushing them step by step towards the abyss. The fall of the Black Ink giant spirit god and Mo Na-yi has also caused a series of unpredictable chain reactions. On every battlefield, the auras of Black Ink clan masters constantly disappeared, and with the fall of so many Black Ink clansmen, more humans were now free and were able to head over and support the tougher battlefields, quickly outnumbering and overpowering their enemies. The advantages of the humans on the battlefield quickly accumulated like a snowball. Seeing that the situation was going from bad to worse, many from the Black Ink clan couldn't help but think of escaping. But how could they possibly run away under these circumstances? Half a day later, as Dialuo's aura swelled up before dissipating, the Black Ink clan collapsed completely. An aura of despair enveloped every last Black Ink clansman. And in such a hopeless situation, many were forced into adopting the determination to make one last stand before their deaths. However, as things had fallen to this point, even if they had this determination, it was impossible to reverse the situation. Somewhere on the battlefield, Missouri, you fought alone against Luo Ting, He Wei Junyang, and Xiang Shan. Even though he was individually stronger than any one of these three, he was still struggling to take them all on at once. Originally, Luo Ting, he was his only opponent, but as the battle progressed, Wei Junyang and Xiang Shan gradually dealt with their own opponents and came to support her. Not only that, but Mo, you clearly felt that other Ninth Order masters had also directed a wisp of divine sense over to keep an eye on their battle. Under this situation, even if Mo, you could defeat the 3 Ninth Order masters, he was likely to be surrounded by even more Ninth Order masters soon after. What was more, he didn't have such ability. Knowing that death was inevitable, Mo, you let go of all his restraints and fought with the mindset that if even one was killed, it would make his death worth it. Thus, he ignored his own injuries and bombarding Xiang Shan with attacks, giving him a hard time. Fortunately, neither Luo Ting, he nor Wei Junyang were inexperienced weaklings. Together, the 3 of them prevented Mou from trying to take Xiang Shan down with him. This fierce battle lasted for almost half a day, and in the end, Xiang Shan endured a hit from his opponent but managed to counterattack and decapitate Mou. Endless Sword Qi then tore Mou's corpse into pieces. With that, all 3 of the royal lords had perished, from a couple hundred at their peak. Now only a few dozen pseudo-royal lords remained, all of them struggling to survive, and at risk of dying at any moment. As for the massive Black Ink clan army, whose troops used to number in the hundreds of millions, most of them had been cut down, and their corpses could be seen littering the vast battlefield. Even at the heart of the no-return pass, humans were shuttling back and forth, killing off the remaining Black Ink clan soldiers. Xiang Shan was seriously injured, so he withdrew to heal while Luo Ting, he and Wei Junyang rushed to other battlefields without stopping. With the royal lords all wiped out, how could the remaining pseudo-royal lords withstand the slaughter of the human race's top masters? One by one, the auras of the pseudo-royal lords began to disappear. When the last one had his body burst apart with black blood splattering everywhere, the fiery-haired Ouyang took a deep breath and clenched his fist. A peaceful silence washed over the vast battlefield. The chaotic war had long since stopped, and the soldiers were looking around at each other, smiling. In the next moment, thunderous cheers erupted, the sound shaking the vast void itself. The humans had won. Sullivan. Finally! Man, Mo Na-Yi is so far the longest focal enemy of Yang Kai. I actually kinda like him. As a character. Not sure about you guys. He was like a roach, but not horrendously written. Wished we got to know him more than just fights and schemes. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5914, Human Race Great Victory. Marshall Peak around 4,000 years ago. The Black Ink clan army swept through and captured the no-return pass. Then the fight moved to the barren territory, which they used as a springboard to invade the 3,000 worlds. This was the prelude to the fall. Since then, the original inhabitants of the 3,000 worlds the human race had been trapped in a corner, enveloped in despair and darkness. The only human race's dogged determination allowed them to survive and develop over the past several thousand years. Countless had fallen in the unceasing battles until today, when they finally reclaimed the no-return pass. In this battle, practically all the Black Ink clansmen in the no-return pass were ruthlessly killed. This battle also signified that the human race had regained the ability to fight back against the Black Ink clan. It was a battle worthy of being recorded in history, to be admired by all future generations. The humiliation and oppression of many years had been fermenting in the hearts of every member of the human race. So when the final Black Ink clansman fell, the warriors could no longer suppress the joy in their hearts, tearing the void apart with the sounds of their cheers. However, the fight was not completely over yet. One last Black Ink giant spirit god was still stubbornly resisting, but anyone could see that it was on its last legs, with Da and Air of the giant spirit god clan to restrain it. This Black Ink giant spirit god couldn't escape. After this, the humans need only cooperate with the giant spirit gods to take down the Black Ink giant spirit god. The human race army, despite having just achieved a great victory, did not delay for long. They did not even have time to tally their losses before their soldiers marched on with their weary bodies under orders from the Supreme Headquarters. The 12 armies of the human race were like 12 unstoppable torrents, blockading the void in all directions around the battlefield of the two giant spirit gods and the Black Ink giant spirit god. The remaining warships of each army were woven into one large fleet, and the power of the various arrays and artifacts on them began silently accumulating power. Their target was the Black Ink giant spirit god. Under this situation, even a being as strong as the Black Ink giant spirit god would not be able to help itself from feeling depressed, as if it had come to the end of its life. It knew that nothing it could do would help it survive today. In fact, it had already felt the urge to run away immediately after Yang Kai and to kill the first Black Ink giant spirit god together. However, Air kept on getting in its way, and it couldn't get away in time. In the short window, Airbot rushed over to provide support, sealing its fate. Currently, the human race army has formed a siege with tens of millions of soldiers. This was the entire military strength that they could mobilize at present. If this was still not enough to deal with a single cornered Black Ink giant spirit god, then what was the point of even talking about a grander crusade? On Pure Yang Pass, Mi Jingluan and the other Ninth Order masters were waiting silently. Ripples suddenly emerged in the void, and Yang Kai's figure appeared. Everyone turned over and nodded lightly at him, and not one person was looking at him without eyes filled with admiration. When it came to both age and experience, Yang Kai may not be able to compare with many of his peers here. Other than Shi Dezhuang and Tang Tao, who had only recently broken through to the Ninth Order, all the others had lived thousands, if not tens of thousands of years longer than he had. However, in terms of ability, he undoubtedly stood as the strongest among them all. If Mi Jingluan was to be called the wisest strategist of the human race army, then Yang Kai was undoubtedly its sharpest blade. Yang Kai's merits accounted for at least 70% of the Black Ink giant spirit god's death, while the remaining 30% was made up by, are we ready? Yang Kai asked. Mi Jingluan nodded. We were just waiting for you. Yang Kai gazed deeply at the Black Ink giant spirit god. Then, let's begin. Mi Jingluan immediately made a gesture, and when the messenger behind him, covered in blood, saw the sign, he immediately conveyed the order in all directions. At the same time, Yang Kai's divine sense surged, and he transmitted a few words over. On the battlefield sealed by the human race army, Three giant beings were fighting unceasingly, world-shattering shockwaves spreading out with each of their clashes. Da, and Air held the advantage, fighting 2 against 1, leaving the black ink giant spirit god into a sorry state, covered in wounds all over its body. One of its legs even looked twisted, most likely from a broken bone. The giant spirit gods and black ink giant spirit gods hardly differed in strength, so in a one-on-one fight, it was basically impossible for either side to gain an advantage over the other. This was evident from all the clashes these supreme masters had fought in the past. Air and his opponent had literally fought nonstop for thousands of years in the barren territory, but let alone deciding a victor, even who had the upper hand, was never determined. However, in such an even conflict, if another master of the same level was to join in, it would form an absolute advantage for the side with greater numbers. Even so, wanting to kill their opponent wouldn't be easy. Even Ada and Air had to be cautious when facing the final struggle of such a powerful opponent. Fortunately, they had reinforcements from the human race to help them. Ada was slightly taken aback for a moment when Yang Kai's voice was transmitted over, but Air reacted immediately and shouted at his brother, "Go!" Saying so, he kicked the black ink giant spirit god in the chest. That kick sent the black ink giant spirit god tumbling, and Air used the momentum of the kick to back away. Even though Ada was a bit slower to react, he had two good things going for him. Firstly, he listened to his brother. Secondly, he listened to Yang Kai. At this moment, he naturally followed suit and quickly retreated while the black ink giant spirit god was staggering. After the two giant spirit gods had created enough distance between them, the void suddenly trembled and countless powerful auras rose up. In the next instant, tens of millions of streams of light swept over from all directions, covering the massive body of the black ink giant spirit god like a storm, their multicolored lights interweaving to form a blinding tapestry. At this moment, the power of the arrays and artifacts on the warships was activated, and the secret techniques and divine abilities of the masters were also being fully unleashed. They continuously bombard the black ink giant spirit god without end. At the center where their attacks were focused, the angry roar of the black ink giant spirit god rang out. For a powerful being like a black ink giant spirit god, ordinary attacks had little to no effect on it. Even the divine abilities of the Ninth Order Masters wouldn't deal much damage to it. However, when the number of these attacks reached a certain threshold and all struck at the same time, the accumulated power was something that no living being could ignore. With numbers, even ants could kill an elephant, let alone the elite soldiers of the human race who have survived countless life and death battles. The burst of light lasted for a long time, and before it even faded, a second volley arrived. The roars of the black ink giant spirit god stopped abruptly, and at the same time, everyone felt a strong aura suddenly flare up in the center of the interwoven lights before it faded away. On pure Yang Pass, all the Ninth Order Masters had looks of astonishment on their faces. Even Yang Kai was surprised. After being taken aback for a moment, Mi Jingluan raised his hand. With the signal given, the attacks of the human race army quickly subsided. Even though the attacks stopped, the dazzling lights persisted for several dozen breaths before gradually dissipating. All eyes were locked on the space in front of them, and what they saw was not the black ink giant spirit god's figure, but only large and dense black ink clouds and remnants of a broken corpse. Yang Kai couldn't help but raise his brow. This second one died just like that. Just 2 rounds of concentrated attacks from the army were enough to kill it? After a moment of silence, Mi Jingluan said, "It seems we overestimated its strength." The plan was originally to weaken the black ink giant spirit god's power first before slowly grinding it down. After all, the 12 armies had already tightly sealed the entire region of the void, while the two giant spirit gods and the Ninth Order Masters were also standing by. There was no escaping for the black ink giant spirit god here. Death was the only fate awaiting it. Who would have thought that before all their follow-up arrangements could come into play, the second black ink giant spirit god would be smashed to pieces? It made it seem as if they had made a big fuss over nothing. The pale-faced Xiang Shan commented from the side, "There's nothing wrong with being careful." It was not that the human race had overestimated the black ink giant spirit god's strength, just that such a good opportunity to set up and concentrate their attacks on it had never existed before. This was an attack powered by every master below the Ninth Order in the entire human race. The fact that the black ink giant spirit god could withstand the first volley without dying alone was enough to show its astonishing strength. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence once again. This sudden change left everyone feeling incredulous until Mi Jingluan's voice rang through the entire battlefield. "Today, we have won a great victory for the human race." After a few breaths of silence, cheers that were even louder than before spread out like waves. Slaughtering the Black Ink clan and taking back the no-return pass essentially secured their victory, but there was still the last Black Ink giant spirit god to be dealt with, so the battle hadn't ended at that point. It wasn't until this moment when the second Black Ink giant spirit god was defeated that victory truly belonged to the human race. From this moment on, the humans had fully regained control of the no-return pass and once again secured the 3,000 worlds. No longer would they have to worry about the Black Ink clan invading. Feelings of joy and exhilaration were transmitted among all the soldiers. Many of the survivors wept, not because they were happy to survive, but because they had to mourn those who died in battle and could not see the glory of the human race's victory. The soldiers expressed their emotions freely. Yang Kai suddenly turned in a certain direction with joy in his eyes. In that direction, among the soldiers cheering in excitement, one person's aura was fluctuating violently. As his aura shook, his momentum soared rapidly. That person clearly realized what was about to happen and looked up towards Pure Yang Pass. Beside him, all the soldiers noticed the situation, and many showed envy in their eyes. "Oh," Yang Lai laughed heartily, "that's Sheng Wu Yu of my profound nether army. I'll go and give him some pointers." Saying so, he flew over to that side with a big smile on his face without any care for his tired and battered body. This couldn't be helped. The person named Zheng Yu was showing signs of breaking through his peak 8th Order bottleneck, which meant that he was about to advance to the 9th Order Open Heaven realm. It was exciting news for everyone. Since about 30 years ago, when Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao successively broke through into the 9th Order, there had been no new 9th Order masters among their people. But everyone knew that Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao's breakthroughs were just the beginning. After them, more 9th Order masters were sure to be born, and it was bound to be an endless process because the World Tree clone's feedback in the Open Heaven realm cradles was just about to demonstrate its greatest effect. There had been a continuous stream of promising seedlings that had advanced directly to the 7th Order over the past few thousand years. Thus, it was only a matter of time before these seedlings reached their final destination, the 9th Order, Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:15. Heavens bless the human race. Marshall Peak, as the first rising star to advance to the 9th Order, Shi Zhuang's advancement could be seen as a sign that the humans had finally passed through the difficult times of stagnation, where new masters were lacking to replace the old. Now, more 9th Order masters would undoubtedly be born in the future. However, after Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao broke through into the 9th Order, no new breakthroughs existed. Until this moment, when the second Black Ink giant spirit god fell, and the humans recaptured the no-return pass, becoming the final victors of this war. Zheng Wuyu, an Eighth Order master, finally showed signs of a breakthrough. They can finally vent the feelings of oppression that have long been brewing within them, as their moods surged for the better, and their aura stirred, coupled with sufficient accumulation of heritage. Breaking through their bottlenecks is a matter of course as the conditions are ripe. Mi Jinglin spoke softly as he looked in that direction. Yang Kai was thoughtful. If that's the case, more than one person may break through this time. In terms of time, many rising stars were qualified to break through to the Ninth Order and had already reached their current limits in the Eighth Order. However, breaking through was not that easy. Oftentimes, it depended on opportunities which could be an epiphany or a sudden event, or maybe even a journey that comes by chance. Among these opportunities, any one of them would trigger one's heart to be moved and then stir up their aura into a state of making a breakthrough. It was thanks to the great victory they gained in this battle that Zheng Wuyu could touch upon this opportunity. If he could do it, then the other good seedlings with sufficient heritage accumulated could do it as well. That was what Yang Kai thought. As if to confirm his guess, similar aura fluctuations came from another direction just as soon as he finished speaking. A second Eighth Order master who sensed an opportunity for a breakthrough appeared. Luo Ting, he looked over in that direction and said happily, "It's from the Red Flame Army. Please excuse me." Breaking through from the Eighth Order to the Ninth Order was a hurdle that, once crossed, would give one the qualification to stand at the peak of their martial Tao and overlook all others. However, crossing that hurdle wasn't easy. At this time, the guidance of elders was very important. Therefore, when Zheng Wuyu's aura surged, Yang Lai rushed over in a hurry. As the profound Nether Army's commander, this was his responsibility. Meanwhile, the Red Flame Army never had a Ninth Order master among their members. So Luo Ting, he took the initiative to take on this responsibility. But that was not the end yet. During the next incense stick of time, various movements continued to appear among the 12 armies, all of them indicating that Eighth Order masters were about to break through. This final battle with the Black Ink clan at the No-Return Pass was like a miraculous medicine for them, bringing opportunities for breakthroughs to those rising stars with the victory that they had won. Yang Kai and 9 other Ninth Order masters shuttled back and forth, each of them taking responsibility for several Eighth Order masters, imparting their experiences of breaking through and pointing out the things they had to pay attention to. All of their charges naturally took note of what they said. This moment could be said to be the most important moment in their lives, and nobody dared to be careless. Even though all of them had expended a lot of energy in the previous battle, it was fortunate that all of them had made sufficient preparations for this moment. So as long as they recovered slightly, they could give their all in breaking through. After a while, on Pure Yang Pass, the Ninth Order masters gathered once again, looking towards various directions in the void, with solemn expressions. In every direction was an Eighth Order master who was about to make a breakthrough at their own designated position to ensure they wouldn't disturb others or be disturbed themselves. Everything was ready, so whether they could successfully advance to Ninth Order or not was up to them now. Breaking through to the Ninth Order was no easy task, and many of their ancestors had stopped at this juncture throughout history. The fact that there were only over 100 Ninth Order masters at the peak of the human race was proof of that. In these past 100,000 years or so, there couldn't have only been that many humans who had the qualifications to break through. However, not everyone qualified to advance to the Ninth Order could break through successfully, but compared to their ancestors, these rising stars had advantages that their predecessors never had, such as the feedback from the World Tree clones, the profound powers of which greatly improved their aptitude and strengthened their small universes. Thus, the risks of breaking through also became smaller for them. In recent years, there had been no instance of an Eighth Order master failing to break through to the Ninth Order. without mentioning Xiang Shan and Ouyang Lai, who had broken through with the help of Supreme Grade Open Heaven Pills, Wei Junyang, and Luo Ting. He had both broken through by themselves, while Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao's breakthroughs also happened smoothly. 23. Mi Jingluan's face was glowing despite his exhaustion, and his eyes were filled with excitement. The heavens have truly blessed the human race. Originally, recapturing the no-return pass, slaughtering the Black Ink clan, and killing 2 Black Ink giant spirit gods was already the best consolation for all the soldiers who died in battle over the past few thousand years. But no one could have expected that as many as 23 Eighth Order Masters would sense an opportunity to break through to the Ninth Order at the end of this battle. This would in turn raise the overall strength of the human race significantly, which would be of great help to them in the upcoming crusade. Overall, the human race was not weak by any definition, but the number of Ninth Order Masters they had was relatively small. However, now it seemed that this disadvantage could also be compensated for. 4 of the 12 armies of the human race had always been without a Ninth Order Masters to lead them, so even though they had more divine spirits to make up for this, the absence of a Ninth Order Master had always been a disadvantage for them. Now, once these Eighth Order Masters broke through to the Ninth Order, each army would have at least 3 Ninth Order Masters assuming command. The strength of each army would then usher in a burst of explosive growth. Mi Jingluan was even considering whether to split the 12 armies up. After all, the number of soldiers in each army was indeed quite large and a little bloated. If they were split, then they could better utilize the strength of the soldiers. Of course, that was just an idea that sprang up. It would require the Ninth Order Masters to discuss and decide if they wanted to put such a plan into action before changes could be made. During the war, Mi Jingluan was able to command the entire army with a single word, but he would not act alone on important matters that might affect the future of the human race when they were not actively in combat. "I hope everything goes smoothly," Ouyang Lai, who was standing nearby, muttered. For so many Ninth Order Masters to break through at once was something that had never happened even in the late ancient era, when the humans first grasped the essence of the open heaven realm method. There would inevitably be failures today, and the only possible outcome of failure here was death. Therefore, while everyone is celebrating, Ouyang Lai was somewhat worried. Every one of these 23 people was an elite among elites, so it would be heartbreaking to lose any of them. While the 23 masters were accumulating strength and attempting a breakthrough, the rest of the army was either resting, cleaning up the battlefield, or counting the spoils of war. Over the years of fighting, the humans had basically used up every resource they gathered, spending every material as soon as it was collected. Yang Kai's huge demand for his cultivation was especially astonishing, almost equaling the amount invested in an entire army. So, even with 3 million cultivators scattered throughout the Black Ink battlefield, mining resources, they did not have much surplus on hand. It was fortunate that they captured the no-return pass, where the Black Ink clan must have some reserves. For thousands of years, the Black Ink clan had occupied most of the 3,000 worlds and the entire Black Ink battlefield, where they had been constantly mining resources and breeding more clansmen. Despite the immense expenditures, they should still have a large amount of resources in reserve. Soon news was coming in from each direction. Mi Jingluan investigated the extent of the damages first. Even though he had a rough idea about it already, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw the results. The army's losses were much lower than he expected. Originally, when Yang Kai returned from the depths of the Black Ink battlefield, and they decided to launch the final battle, they had mentally prepared themselves to face severe damage to the human race army's foundation. This was unavoidable, though. The Black Ink clan's reinforcements were on their way, and if the humans did not capture the no-return pass quickly, they would have to face the fate of being caught in a pincer attack, which could very well destroy their entire army. But when the fight was actually done, and over with, the extent of the damage was still within an acceptable range, and their losses were not as severe as had been expected. The greatest reason for that was because the battle had not dragged on too long. The critical moment was the fall of the first black ink giant spirit god. Together, Yang Kai and Ada were able to kill him in just a few dozen breaths, which greatly shook the morale of the Black Ink clan. Following that, Emonaye's fall dropped the morale of the Black Ink clan even further, while also greatly disrupting their ability to coordinate and organize themselves, as they acted decisively and were able to settle the fight quickly. The losses to the human race army were naturally kept to a minimum. Of course, the purifying light that erupted from the sacrifice of the 2,000 Eighth Order small stone race masters was also indispensable. At that time, the purifying light not only severely damaged the Black Ink giant spirit god, but almost instantly wiped out a large swath of Black Ink clansmen, while all the Black Ink clansmen over the entire battlefield were affected by it somewhat, lowering their strength to a certain extent. All these unexpected events laid the foundations for their grand victory. After looking through the battle report, Mi Jingluan handed it over to Yang Kai, who couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief as he swept his divine sense over it. The losses were not small, but weren't too large either. They still had the strength necessary to continue their crusade. If the casualties of this battle had exceeded 30%, they may have lost that ability. It should be noted that there were still the Black Ink clan reinforcements waiting for them, which was another difficult hurdle they had to jump through. All they had to do now was wait for the 23 Eighth Order Masters to break through and stabilize their cultivation. After the armies were reorganized, they could finally embark on the final crusade. Yang Kai looked out into the depths of the void, with deep worry creasing his brows. Even now, he had no idea what had happened at the Primordial Heaven Source Grand Restriction, nor what the situation was with the suppressing Black Ink army. His family and disciples were all over there, and it would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried about them. If he could, he would have rushed to the Primordial Heaven Source Grand Restriction as soon as he found out about the movements of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements, but he couldn't go earlier or even now. As the strongest Ninth Order Master, the battle at the No Return Pass would not have ended so easily if he wasn't here. Between family and the survival of the entire human race, a choice had to be made. The only thing Yang Kai could be sure of now was that even if something did happen at the Primordial Heavens Source Grand Restriction, it was still in progress. Otherwise, it would be impossible for there to not be a single true royal lord in the reinforcements. Though it was partly wishful thinking, this conclusion was the only comfort Yang Kai had in his heart. As time passed, the auras of the 23 people in the void continued to fluctuate, and each of them had an illusory phantom of their own small universe appear behind them. As their auras continued to fluctuate and their momentums rose continuously, their bottlenecks were gradually broken, and the boundary walls of their small universes that had reached their limit began expanding again. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:16. Tao Lord, please save me. Marshall Peak in the midst of the grueling weight. An aura belonging uniquely to masters in the Ninth Order rippled out, and as their small universe burst out in expansion, everyone knew that the first successful Ninth Order Master had appeared. It was not Zheng Wuyu, but instead another rising star from the Burning Moon Army. Everyone who was watching the situation closely couldn't help but reveal joyful expressions. The birth of the first Ninth Order Master seemed to trigger a chain reaction. Within the coming half-day, a second and a third success appeared. After the day was over, the number had grown to as many as 7. By the next day, there were 11. By the third day, 14. The fourth day, 17. The success rates of the rising stars who have received feedback from the World Tree clones and possessed unparalleled talent were incredibly high. Until now, none of them had shown too many problems with advancing. However, there were still 6 who were struggling to break through, which Yang Kai and the others couldn't help but worry about. Breaking through, as a result of sudden enlightenment, had to be done in one fell swoop. The longer it dragged on, the worse the situation would become. For days have already passed. Those who were able to break through successfully had already broken through. The remaining 6 would likely experience some setbacks, which made the others worry and also feel helpless at the same time. Nobody could help another person break through. Everything depended on their own hard work and accumulations. If their accumulation was enough and their luck was not bad, then they would naturally be able to succeed, just like the 17 before them. But fate was a tricky thing that nobody could perfectly predict. Yang Kai suddenly turned his gaze towards a certain direction. There, a person was pushing their aura hard. The illusory phantom of their small universe was constantly expanding and contracting behind them, as if it were a living being that was breathing. If everything went smoothly, then once the illusory phantom of the small universe expanded to its limit, it would break through and expand greatly. However, Yang Kai clearly sensed that this cultivator was somewhat lacking in strength, and he couldn't help but sigh, knowing that it would be difficult for them to succeed with their current heritage. This was inevitable. Throughout history, the path from the 8th order to the 9th order had always been full of obstacles. If there existed those who succeeded, then it was only natural for some to fail as well. At a certain moment, when the illusory phantom of the small universe expanded again, there was an obvious sound of something breaking. This caused the expressions of all the 9th order masters who were paying attention to this person to change, and the cultivator who was trying to break through also had a panicked look on his face. He then opened his eyes with a bitter expression. The cracking sounds grew more and more intense, and the illusory phantom of his small universe was becoming difficult to maintain. His small universe seemed to be on the brink of rupturing. The person turned their head to Yang Kai, and after a moment of anxiety, his expression calmed down. He smiled, ready to accept his final fate. The next moment, his vision suddenly blurred, and Yang Kai, who had been observing from a distance, appeared in front of him and raised his hand to touch the top of his head. A river flowed, and waves roared. The space-time river enveloped everything, and space-time strength suppressed and sealed the local space. Everything seemed to turn still, including the rupturing of the small universe. The man looked up at Yang Kai in surprise and asked, "Tao Lord?" Yang Kai lowered his head to look at him and smiled. "Are you in such a hurry to die?" The man felt a little ashamed and lowered his head, unable to meet Yang Kai's gaze directly. "I did my best, but I still failed to live up to Tao Lord's expectations." Yang Kai was silent for a moment before he spoke in a commanding voice. "Look at me, Wang Chong." The man raised his head abruptly, feeling extremely surprised. "Tao Lord remembers me?" Even though he was born in the Void Tao Temple, he never interacted much with Yang Kai after being brought out of the Void Tao Temple and meeting him for the first time. He was proficient in neither the Tao of time nor the Tao of space, but cultivated the spear Tao instead. He was also not qualified to be selected to be a Void Guard, and over the years he had never received any more attention or care from Yang Kai. He thought that someone as great as the Tao Lord, the one who shouldered the fate of his people, would only be concerned about the survival of the human race. Even though he came from the Void Tao Temple, the only connection they had was in name. The Tao Lord had also never given special treatment to any of the disciples who came from the Void Tao Temple. He never thought that he would be called out by the Tao Lord by name today. "I remember every one of you," Yang Kai began. "The survival of the 3,000 worlds was not really your concern to begin with, yet I brought you out of the Void Tao Temple and threw you into this cruel and bloody battlefield to sacrifice yourselves for the survival of a group of humans you have never met before. If anyone should feel guilty, it should be me." Wang Chong was anxious to respond. It is the honor of us disciples to serve you, Tao Lord. Even so, Yang Kai nodded gently. You are all excellent, and have never let me down. Wang Chang's expression turned grim. This disciple cannot break through to the ninth order, and my small universe is about to rupture. So, what if you reach the ninth order? So, what if you're in the eighth order? You slaughtered many of our enemies from the Black Ink clan. It is the same when you were in the eighth order. You still killed our enemies and pushed them back. You also protected your allies behind you. Your eldest senior brother Miao's aptitude is limited. Unless he can obtain a supreme grade open heaven pill, he will never be able to reach the ninth order. But isn't he still living a fulfilling life? You didn't fail to break through, because you have not worked hard enough. Destiny simply didn't favor you today. That is all, Yang Kai reassured him. Turning the conversation around, Yang Kai raised his voice. I only ask you one thing. Even if you cannot reach the ninth order in this lifetime, can you still hold on to your original convictions and sacrifice yourself for the human race? Will you fight and slay our enemies to eradicate this evil? Wang Chang answered meekly. Naturally, I am willing, but Tao Lord, my small universe is about to rupture. Can I still survive? The small universe was the foundation of every open heaven realm master. If the small universe ruptures, the cultivator would perish. Yang Kai grinned. Are you dead now? Not yet. Wang Chang shook his head. Even he himself thought his answer was ridiculous after saying it. If you are willing to live, then you can live. If you are not willing, no one can save you. Wang Chang seemed to understand something, and his dark eyes lit up again. Tao Lord, please save me. Yang Kai nodded lightly. Looking up at the small universe behind Wang Chang, he contemplated for a moment before extending a finger. At the same time, the space-time river that suppressed and sealed the space began to surge wildly. In the far-off void, Mi Jingluen and others were watching the situation attentively. Everyone was heartbroken. After 17 out of the 23 cultivators eligible to break through to the ninth order successfully advanced, a failure still appeared in the end. At such a critical moment, failure was equivalent to death. However, just as everyone was silently waiting for fate to carry out its judgment, the space-time river suddenly appeared, surrounded by the fluctuation of the space principles. It wasn't until this moment that everyone realized that Yang Kai had rushed over. No one knew why Yang Kai had gone over at this time. But before anyone could see what was happening, the space-time river suddenly disappeared. Following that, Yang Kai returned to his original position. It was as if he had never left, only his face was slightly paler than before. Junior brother, Mi Jingluen was shocked. Huh? What just happened? Oh, Yang Lai suddenly exclaimed, scaring Mi Jingluen so much that he choked on his words. Following his gaze, all the ninth order masters were shocked by what they saw. The rupturing of Wang Chang's small universe had mysteriously been reversed, leaving the illusory phantom behind him, completely intact. The only differences were there was no longer any sign of a breakthrough going on, and Wang Chang's aura had become weaker, as if his foundation had been damaged. Many thoughts flashed through Mi Jingluen's mind as he turned to Yang Kai in astonishment. Junior brother, what did you do? Regardless of what Yang Kai did, they could tell from the results in front of them that Wang Chang, who was doomed to die, had been saved while his breakthrough had failed. Compared to dying and fading away, this was undoubtedly a good result. At the very least, Wang Chang had survived and could still contribute to the war. Yang Kai said, I crippled hundreds of years of his foundation. Is that also possible? Oh, Yang Lai couldn't stop his eyes from widening in surprise. This was an incredible event that was simply unheard of, but bizarre things seemed to happen around Yang Kai often. Xiang Shan furrowed his brow. Even if you have crippled hundreds of years of his foundation, how did you save his life when his small universe was about to rupture? Many things can be done in a frozen space-time. I just gave it a try, and it somehow worked. Yang Kai gave a casual explanation. Everyone finally understood. Just now, they only saw Yang Kai rushing to Wang Chang's side for an instant before returning. In reality, the time Yang Kai spent in that frozen space-time was not just a moment. He must have made a lot of preparations and used many means to suppress Wang Chang's breakthrough to save his life. What he did was nothing short of a miracle. But manipulating space-time on any level was not an easy task. Whether it be the Tao of space or the Tao of time, both were extremely profound and esoteric. Yang Kai was perhaps the only person capable of such means in this universe. What are the drawbacks? Mi Jingluan asked excitedly. He was originally worried that they would have to see their people fading away among those who were breaking through to a higher realm, but seeing that Yang Kai had such a technique, he could save their lives. These warriors have served the human race for thousands of years, so even if they had to die, it should be on the battlefield. It was the honor they deserved. They should not be dying on the path of breaking through. The only thing to worry about now was whether there were any drawbacks to this method of saving people. He will never be able to break through this bottleneck again in his lifetime. If he's lucky, he may return to the peak of the Eighth Order, but if he's unlucky, he will only be able to maintain his current cultivation, Yang Kai explained. Crippling several hundred years of Wang Chang's cultivation had brought him down directly from the peak of the Eighth Order, and this kind of destruction caused by external forces had undoubtedly damaged Wang Chang's foundation. That was also the reason why Yang Kai had spoken so much with Wang Chang earlier. For a favored son of heaven who had the potential to stand at the pinnacle of martial Tao, lingering on and barely surviving might not be considered a blessing. The greatest pain and torment for a cultivator was to have one's martial Tao being cut off. If Wang Chang was unable to accept such a fate, he would still perish. Only by letting go of his obsession could Yang Kai's rescue become meaningful. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 59:17, prepare to set off again. Martial Peak, the cost was undoubtedly high, but for those who wished to remain among the living, it was nothing. After Wang Chang, 2 more people failed to advance, and Yang Kai stepped in to save their lives one after another. Fortunately, while the other 3 encountered some obstacles in their breakthrough, they all safely advanced in the end. At this point, a total of 20 out of the initial 23 had successfully broken through to the Ninth Order, which meant that the human race had seen the birth of 20 new Ninth Order Masters in one go, including Yang Kai and the others. There were now 30 Ninth Order Masters among their ranks. This number was still not comparable to the human race at their peak, but it was a good start. The Grand Army was now resting as almost everyone had injuries to recover from. Conquering the no-return pass was only the beginning. In their original plans, the next step would be a crusade against the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction. The human race had suffered a crushing defeat outside the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction before, resulting in countless deaths and the eventual invasion of the 3,000 worlds. Nobody wanted to experience that failure again. Even after that defeat, the humans had the strength to fight on. But now, the human race had gathered all their strength. If they were to lose this time, they were likely to be doomed to extinction. However, even the best laid plans could never keep up with reality. The appearance of the Black Ink Clan's reinforcements disrupted the original strategy. Before they could embark on their crusade to the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction, an elite Black Ink Clan army of 10 million had to be disposed of. Without breaking through this obstacle, there was no point in thinking about a crusade to the Grand Restriction. The only good news was that the reinforcements had emerged from the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction, and a lifetime of isolation left them with very limited knowledge of the current situation of the human race. They did not know about the existence of the Void Guard, nor were they aware that their movements were being monitored by the humans, something which could be exploited. Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan held several discussions and finally came up with a feasible plan. While the Grand Army was recuperating, some confidential items were rapidly being developed, consuming a massive amount of resources. Half a year after the humans conquered the no-return pass, Pure Yang Pass, inside the main conference hall, the Ninth Order Masters were gathered. In front of the 29th Order Masters, who had only just broken through after the last war, people like Yang Kai were already considered veterans. Everyone couldn't help but lament how the newcomers were replacing the old members, and the back waves of the river were pushing the front waves on. A total of 30 people were gathered here. It had been thousands of years since the humans had seen such a luxurious lineup. After half a year, the new Ninth Order Masters had just barely stabilized their cultivation. Though they have yet to fully consolidate their newfound strength, there was simply no time to let them slowly adjust their conditions. After the last battle, they had taken a full half year to recover, which was a luxury for the current human race. Mi Jingluan raised his hand, and jade slips flew out to everyone one by one. As they examined these slips, Mi Jingluan spoke. After that major battle half a year ago, the Void Guard scouting ahead reported that the reinforcements from the Primordial Heavens Source Grand Restriction have stopped and are now waiting to ambush us when we set out. They are currently located around the junction of the Black Ink battlefield and the Late Ancient Era battlefield, though much closer to the latter. Listening to his briefing, the Ninth Order Masters checked the jade slips and found this basic information was listed inside. Mi Jingluan continued, "From the intelligence we have now, the Black Ink clan reinforcements have found out about the war here at the No-Return Pass, as well as the outcome of the battle. That's why they are lying in wait for our army to fall into their trap ourselves. This is good news. Since they have no idea that their actions have already been exposed, we can use their plan against them. Since they have chosen to ambush us, we can take advantage of their inaction to surround them and wipe them out in one fell swoop. If we are to go against the Black Ink clan at the Primordial Heavens Source Grand Restriction, these reinforcements must be eliminated first. While you are all recovering from your injuries, Junior Brother Yang and I have formulated a plan. Please look it over. If there are any issues, please speak up as soon as possible so that we can discuss and solve them together." The group silently looked through the jade slips. The newly advanced Ninth Order Masters remained silent, not because they felt that they lacked the qualifications to express their opinions, but because they felt that the plan was indeed feasible and there was nothing that had to be changed. They knew that while they were recovering and stabilizing their cultivation in retreat, Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan were still working hard. Xiang Shan, on the other hand, asked, "Other than the fact that they have no true royal lords among their ranks, the number of masters they have is not inferior to the no-return pass when it was at its peak. Can we confirm there are no true royal lords among them?" Mi Jingluan looked at Yang Kai. "Junior brother, Yang personally went to investigate and can confirm this. Of course, we will survey the area again to ensure that our intelligence is correct before we begin our operation." Xiang Shan nodded lightly. "Then there's no problem." Even though the forces of this reinforcement army were not much different in terms of strength from the forces the Black Ink clan had during their peak at the No-Return Pass, the situation they were facing now was quite different. At the very least, these reinforcements did not have any true royal lords or Black Ink giant spirit gods among them. Meanwhile, the humans had not only gained 20 more Ninth Order Masters, but they also had the support of Ata and Aer. The advantages brought by the two giant spirit gods alone were immeasurable. Furthermore, there was a big difference between trying to siege a fortified position and conducting a field battle. Even if they had to face an army of millions of elites, the humans were confident that they could defeat the Black Ink clan with minimal losses as long as careful preparations were made. Since there are no issues, let's proceed according to plan. We have been preparing for this battle for the past 6 months, so all armies should be ready to depart in 3 days. All the Ninth Order masters stood up to answer before dispersing. After capturing the no-return pass half a year ago, the new Ninth Order masters were divided among the various armies. Ultimately, it was decided to keep the configuration of the 12 armies. So each army now had 2 or 3 Ninth Order masters assuming command, avoiding the awkward situation of anyone lacking a Ninth Order master. Once everyone left, Mi Jingluan turned to Yang Kai and asked, "Junior brother, how are your injuries?" Yang Kai replied, "Nothing to be concerned about, but I won't be able to use my dragon vein powers for a short period. The drawbacks of using his dragon bead could not be restored quickly. It would have to take at least a decade of uninterrupted rest for him to properly recover, something the humans could not afford right now." Mi Jingluan nodded. "We still need Junior Brother to work hard in the coming battles." "I know, it is my duty." Yang Kai nodded and stood up. "If Senior Brother has no other orders, I will go and cultivate now." Mi Jingluan laughed. "Go ahead." As soon as Yang Kai left the main hall, a face appeared in the void that blocked out the sky, revealing an ingratiating smile. Yang Kai was speechless and threw a world bead to Ada as he told him, "Eat less and don't fall asleep. We're going into battle soon." While chewing loudly on the world bead, Ada answered him casually. Not long after, the space-time river appeared outside of the no-return pass. Plunging inside, Yang Kai began refining resources and cultivating. Time waited for no one. And Yang Kai was now using every moment he could to improve his heritage, trying to reach the peak of the Ninth Order as soon as possible. After teaming up with Ada to slay a black ink giant spirit god last time, Yang Kai realized that he was still too weak. The black ink giant spirit god was only one of Mo's creations, a mere soul clone. If he had to face a Mo someday, what would he do? Open Heaven Realm Masters were undoubtedly no match for Mo. According to Tsang, Mo had already reached the legendary creation realm. However, with Yang Kai's increasing progress and enlightenment in his Grand Daos in recent years, he faintly felt that something was off about the belief that Mo was in the creation realm. Of course, he had no idea what exactly the creation realm was, but he knew that he needed to cultivate hard to bring his own cultivation to its peak before he could gain the qualifications to explore the mysteries of the next realm. He was still lacking in many ways. Every moment of free time was extremely precious for Yang Kai in the current situation. 3 days passed in a flash. Outside Pyongyang Pass, the Grand Army were fully armed and ready to go. The mood was solemn, and killing intent filled the air. After preparing for half a year, the soldiers had still not lost their momentum or fighting spirit. All of them knew that taking the no-return pass was only the beginning, and winning a single battle did not mean the end of the war. Only when the human race conquered the primordial heavens' source grand restriction and vanquished Mo could they truly call themselves victorious. In this situation, letting their guard down in any way would mean death. 12 universe fragments had already been prepared and lay across the outside of the no-return pass. These universe fragments were recently moved back from the depths of the void by the humans, and each one corresponded to an army. At a certain moment, following the commands of the army commanders, the soldiers gathered on these universe fragments. "Junior Brother, it's up to you now." Inside the no-return pass, Mi Jingluan turned his head and said to Yang Kai. Yang Kai nodded and took a step forward, arriving at the closest universe fragment. Summoning his space-time river, Yang Kai quickly turned it into a torrent which wrapped around the universe fragment in front of him. Looking from afar, the surging river was just like a giant snake coiling and enveloping the universe fragment. Dao's strength surged, and with the shaking of the space-time river, a section of the void was stripped away and compressed while the universe fragment within shrank rapidly. In less than an hour, Yang Kai retrieved the river and reached out, grabbing a newly formed world bead. After a quick investigation, he tossed it to Xiang Shan, who was standing next to him. Even Xiang Shan, who was used to seeing the strong winds and waves, caught it in a panic as he cradled the world bead in his palms. There was no helping this, as the entire Blood Flame army was currently inside this world bead. Heavens know what damage it would cause to the army if the bead was to shatter. At this moment, Xiang Shan could only sigh and marvel at the profundity of space secret techniques. He had never imagined that Yang Kai could do such a thing, refining an entire universe fragment where an army of millions of human masters were located into a single bead. If you had such a technique, why didn't you use it during the previous crusade? Xiang Shan couldn't help but ask. When the humans set out from Black Territory, they had to trek through a long and arduous journey. At that time, they used the method of taking low and mid-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters into the small universes of high-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters to reduce the cost and risk of transmission. Even though it was still considered convenient, it was far inferior to the current method Yang Kai was displaying. Marshall Peak, that you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.